Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Emma Lincoln and I'm the project officer for the age-friendly Isle of Wight. And with me this afternoon, I have a few people actually, but sharing the presentation with me this afternoon is Dr. Michelle Legg, who is the Clinical Director, NHS Hampshire, Southampton and Isle of Wight CCG. And also I have Nell, who is one of my project team, who is doing all the making sure the technology goes all right. And then I have here as well Anne, who is my support worker. So I have a site problem. So if people use the chat function, I can't see it, but Anne will tell me what's on there. The session will be recorded and will be available on the National Co-Production YouTube channel afterwards. It'd be great if people could put their cameras on, if you're able. If you'd rather not because you've got a bad hair day or something, then that's fine. No, it's better for interaction. It'd be lovely to see you all. Fantastic, thank you. But please keep your cameras on mute unless you want to ask a question, just to avoid the background interference. As I said, please do feel free to use the chat function to ask questions or to introduce yourselves at any point. As I said, if you want to ask me anything directly, then Anne will relay to me as I can't see what's up there. And the session is part of the Festival of Co-Production Learning, Stronger Together. And Age Friendly Ireland is part of the National Lottery Ageing Better programme. And we are one of 14 projects across the country. We're in our 7th year of funding. And the Isle of Wight is an interesting area in that we have a very high ageing demographic. And over 50% of our population on the island are over the age of 50. So today, Dr. Legg and myself are going to be sharing our learning around how we co-produced an age-friendly framework tool for GP surgeries, which enables surgeries to pull together their own action plans. And we did this through co-production with our patient participation group and with our public forums. So a patient participation group is where we involve the patients and we involve the GPs or the practice managers. And it's a facilitated group to ensure that all the changes, that they can work together to make any changes that they feel would be beneficial to the surgery, benefiting the patients, the staff, and anybody else who uses the service. And they can also look at services they might be able to deliver out into the community as well. So we work with the patient participation group, and we also work with our public forums. And obviously with age friendly, important that it's that bottom-up approach. So you're really at that grassroots level, working with the public to ensure that you work in partnership with them to look at changes that can influence strategy and policy and cultural change within your own areas. And our public forums initially in 2015 had a meeting which everybody was invited along to, anybody who was interested, and they themselves shaped how they wanted the public forums to work. And that happened, they decided that they should meet quarterly in different locations across the island, and they were the ones who picked their own agendas each time. And as we've moved into the COVID times, obviously that has moved to an online platform and has been really successful as well. But as you'll see from the next slide, what are the outcomes for today? So you'll see that the benefit of working with a patient participation group to make the GP surgeries or a workplace age friendly. And we've developed a tool that will show you how you can make other workplaces age friendly. And the aims of the session is to introduce you to the age-friendly framework document co-produced by the patient participation group and public forums, and to share with you the workshop delegates, the toolkit and a film that produced alongside this piece of work. So just to take you a little bit of background and context to this, we initially worked with Dr. Legg and her surgery in Ryde, which is Tower House Surgery, in 2014 to 2015, and that was when I was working with Age UK and heading up the Dementia Friendly Communities programme. And it was very evident right from the word go, really, that it was important that we should be co-producing any initiatives, projects, services that we wanted to focus on and develop for people with dementia. We really need to make them at the heart of them to be the decision makers. And we did this initially by carrying out a series of interviews, very informal interviews, a cup of tea and a piece of cake and a chatter in a cafe when we could. And it was just asking people with dementia, you know, what are the issues you find? What are the barriers you find within your community? And these were people who were very much obviously in the early stages of dementia. And a recurring theme came up at all these interviews, and that was really around transport, travel on buses. One lady in particular was talking to us about a really bad experience she had had on a bus where the driver just didn't understand her memory difficulties and was quite unhelpful, and she got off on the bus, really didn't know where she was and was very frightened and lost all confidence in going back on a bus again. But another person told us about a really good experience they'd had on a bus with their memory problems and how helpful the driver could be. So they wanted us to work with our local bus company, and we have one bus company on the Isle of Wight, Southern Vectus, to look at how could we better make that that situation for people with dementia, so they got that consistent good approach from the drivers. So they pulled together people with dementia and other people with other disabilities, and our stakeholder steering group, the safe journey cards, which you can see up on the slide now. And as you can see, these cover a range of different needs, and you can see there's one with memory problems. And there were other things, and those cards were disseminated across all, you know, community places and doctor surgeries, libraries, the council, to ensure that they got out far and wide to our residents here. And at the same time, people with dementia were talking about, we want to go somewhere safe. If we don't know where we are, where can we go and be safe until somebody can come and get us, or we remember where we need to be? So we developed some safe haven spaces, and one was at Tower House Surgery, and then we had a couple at 2 of our local libraries in Newport and Ryde, and 2 at the local travel shops joined to the bus station in, again, Ryde and Newport. So I'm going to hand over to you in a second to Dr. Legg. So Dr. Legg, at the point of time we were doing the dementia friendly work, was the clinical lead for frail elderly and dementia on the island. And she also sat on our dementia friendly community steering group. And when we worked with Michelle on that steering group, one of the first things we actually did was to produce this logo here that you can see on the screen. And this was a particularly good logo in the sense that it was very much driven by people with dementia, saying that these are really good colours for people who have dementia to recognise. And this is how the dementia friendly logo appeared. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Michelle, Dr. Michelle Legg. Thank you, Michelle.
It's a real pleasure to be here today, and I'm absolutely delighted. I'm always delighted to talk about anything to do with dementia or older people. I just have to warn you though, I am at work, and I'm actually duty doctor, so my door may be knocked on, so I'm slightly anxious that at any moment there may be a knock in the background, so if that happens I apologize in advance. At the time, it's been really interesting to go back and think about what we did 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, and at the time, as Emma's already said, we were working on dementia at that point, and it was such a special time when we were able to do lots of really important stuff for our patients with dementia. And in my role, I was able to really give the people at Tower House, obviously my colleagues, they really felt empowered basically to go forward and do lots of learning, lots of activity. And the lady that you see here had just gone on dementia awareness training given by Dr. Gemma Jones, who's very well known in the field for giving excellent training, but also being a really good advocate for dementia awareness and training. And there's this lady called Sam. She came back to me one day and said, you know, people with dementia do much better, respond much better with people in bright colours. And can I, when it's appropriate and I need to change my uniform, can I have a brighter uniform? And I'm like, well, Sam, if you want to wear a bright pink uniform, because that's the colour she wanted to wear, yeah, absolutely. And actually, but what we actually introduced is that all new people that joined the surgery, they actually were given the choice of much brighter uniforms. And we have a real character, Mark, and his uniform is bright red, and he chose bright red uniform for his choice, just bright colours. And basically it was a really empowering time, and I still am incredibly proud of that work that we did at that time. And because of the work that I did, and I was very privileged to be involved with, I worked with the Wessex Academic Health Science Network as their dementia lead as well. And we were doing lots of different stuff. And one day the person that I was working with said that she'd been working with a GP practice in Hampshire, and they'd been working along the lines of Icepace, which is basically something that hospital wards had been implementing, slightly more structured, looking at environment, space, care plans in a much more structured way. And I'd sort of said, well, basically, oh no, we did it ad hoc. But basically, I basically said, oh no, we just did ours. But what it did was that we introduced the fact that we compared how Tower House had introduced dementia-friendly changes and how this other practice had done theirs in a much more structured way. We'd compared the two, and actually they were very, very similar in how we'd implemented them. But what we'd done is that we had validated that way of doing things, and that is quite important because actually, when I hand back over, I'm going to hand back to Emma in a minute. We built on we built on that template in how we made our things, our surgeries age friendly. So anyway, I'm going to hand back to Emma now.
Thank you, Michelle. So after our dementia-friendly surgery funding, dementia-friendly communities funding ended, we were then in receipt of the lottery funding, which was to address age-friendly. And I think it'd be fair to say that, you know, if you're making something age-friendly, it's going to be good for dementia-friendly and vice versa. So when we convened as an age-friendly steering group, Michelle Legg and I had long conversations about, well, wouldn't it be great actually to take this a step further, dementia-friendly surgery work, and make this an age-friendly surgery, and be the first on the island to do that, which was great. Dr. Legg did say I would have to do quite a bit of convincing to the practice manager that this wasn't going to cost too much money. So we met up, myself and the practice manager and Dr. Legg, to have an initial meeting about, well, what would age-friendly surgery mean to you? How would it benefit you? And we were very clear to explain that it was going to benefit the GPs, the staff, and the patients, most importantly. It would be a better all-over experience for the patients. And if you're engaging with your patients by using your patient participation group, the patients would then feel that their needs and concerns are really being listened to, which is, you know, why it's so important to engage with a PPG and older people. And it would pave the way for a better relationship, mutual understanding with the GPs and the surgery staff and the patients. It would, the correct use of stretched resources, which is always very, very important, and the services. Patients are relaxed and confident, and some meaningful conversations and possible things could be identified quickly. Fewer missed appointments, which I'm sure you'll all appreciate is you know, very frustrating for doctors if people are missing their appointments, and increased patient safety. It's important to stress, and we did stress this with the practice manager, that these changes, they need not be extravagant and they need not be costly. So just to give you an example of an example we actually put to him at the time, we said, well, look, you've got some steps outside. They're really difficult to see. I've mentioned earlier, I have a sight problem. I couldn't see the steps. Simple, put a line on your steps. It's going to make it much easier. So we were getting a little bit of interest at this point. It isn't going to cost too much money. That's fine. But it was also important to make clear that any age-friendly changes you are putting in place aren't just going to benefit older people. Classic example of the lines on steps, you're immediately helping people who've got sight problems. If there's a ramp, it's going to help mums with buggies, etc., etc. So what did we do? We then set up a workshop, and this workshop was made up of the patient participation group, of which there were, I think, about 13 or 14 members at the time, and then Dr. Legg and also the practice manager. And we wanted to really evoke discussion. We wanted the older people to just start saying what was good, what was bad. So we asked these 4 basic questions. What should an age-friendly surgery include? What is very good about Tower House surgery and already age-friendly, which there were some really good things going on already, obviously from the dementia-friendly work that we've talked about. What needs to be improved to make the surgery age-friendly, and how do you get to the surgery? Obviously very important, the whole transport issue again. So this did evoke quite a lot of discussions. We split the group into 3 different groups, and this led to them coming up with 6 headings. And if we look at the next slide, you'll see that this is our framework document. So underneath those headings are much more detail, which Dr. Legg will go into in more detail in a moment. So this was the 6 headings, and the bullet points under each of those was what the patients came up with, patient participation group, Dr. Legg and the practice manager came up with themselves. We then took this out to the public forums. Now, this wasn't just obviously people from that local area, this was people from across the island, to look at how they might implement this in their own surgeries. And this was what we then called, this developed the age-friendly surgery framework. And this became a model of best practice, a best practice charter for surgeries to take and use. And I think as we would make it, we said earlier, if you can see what, these headings and the things underneath, actually you could take this into any work environment to make your own work environments age-friendly. So I'm going to hand back to Dr. Legg just to talk you through how this impacted on their surgery and just look at this charter in more detail.
Thanks, Emma. I think just to say also, our patient participation group was something that we'd already established and had met for several years with them. We always had a very vibrant patient participation group, and I'd already invested quite a lot of time in meeting with them. I think it's really important, and still do. I think COVID's just made that we haven't met with them recently, so there feels that a gap at the moment. For me, my services are for patients, and yes, of course, there's always issues. And I'm sure people will always have problems accessing GPs, and I know that, but just putting that to one side, I'm very keen to know what patients feel about my services and how I can improve them. And it's no use me thinking about how I can improve the services. I need to know how patients feel. So we'd already had a very vibrant patient participation group, and this was such a great project for them to participate with, and it was a really good project to do with them, and we really enjoyed it actually. So I just wanted to say that it was a really great thing, and they really felt valued that we brought that to them to do. I just wanted to add that to that at the beginning. So what's really important if you're going to do something like this is to identify a champion. And the first thing is to say is it should not be a GP or practice manager. Do not choose the busiest person, but actually do choose somebody who it means a lot to. So somebody that's maybe got somebody that's got an elderly relative or feels very passionately about older people, because they will be the person that drives this through. And that, I think, is one of the most important things to develop, and to get a framework that's really going to be achievable, because they will drive this through. I think, sorry, can we just go back to that first slide? Would that be all right? I also think it would be quite a good thing is for us was to have a champion within the patient participation group, because even if you've got that, when you start this, you can check and balance against that person. So later you'll find out that the person in the video that Emma's already mentioned, that was our person that we could sort of send an email to and check that we were on cue with what things we're doing. It's also important that person that's your champion is aware of things that are happening that may be age related. So Falls Awareness Week, dementia related stuff, things like that, that you can then advertise in your workspace. So, you know, it doesn't have to be a GP practice. If it's a vet space, a council office, you know, somebody that will be aware to be looking out for these things. So if I can have the next slide, please. Partnership working is essential, and so if you are an age-friendly working place, you need to be making sure that everything that you do is in partnership with your carers, the friends and family of that person that is an aged person. You know, even if you're talking about a veterinary practice, for example, older people often don't want to go into hospital, for example, because they're worried about their dogs. But actually, that veterinary area could be giving them lots of contacts about volunteers that walk dogs, for example. So that's an age-friendly place. We're giving them contacts and stuff, and that would be in an area where you would be giving information in your age-friendly area, and that's what we mean about partnership working, where you begin offering that sort of information. You're extending that for your family and friends, always giving that sort of information out all the time. And carers are obviously extremely important, particularly, you know, if a carer gets unwell, then they are the person looking after that older person. So obviously, you know, with COVID and everything, it's so important that they get health checks, flu vaccine and COVID. I mean, obviously we're particularly aware that carers were offered the COVID vaccine and things like that. Next slide, please. Yes, staff who are trained. I mean, this is, you know, really, really important. As Emma's mentioned, you know, the bus drivers, that some that were really, really good, that understood those needs that are unspoken, whereas some that didn't understand those needs. So that you know, that sometimes it's really quite subtle. You know, people, for example, it's an ongoing debate: is somebody housebound? It's really important for us because resources are really stretched, and we often don't want to go and visit somebody, if I'm honest, because they're housebound, or are they not housebound? Well, if somebody's got a lift once a month, because that's when their carer can give them a lift, should they have that lift to be taken to see a doctor, or should they have that lift to be taken somewhere nice? And staff that are trained to sort of understand that sort of nuance, and how do we record that? You know, it's being an age-friendly practice, and actually my understanding is that actually probably we say that person is housebound and we should go visit them, and that one lift a month they should be taken somewhere nice for their well-being. If somebody's missing appointments, is that because they can't hear the appointment properly on the phone? They're forgetting their appointments. At my practice, I might get an email from a receptionist to let me know that that's happening. So it's all those understanding of those issues around an older person, and staff that are trained to recognise that is really important. We have practitioners now that are key workers in that, where we can refer people to, and that's great. So we have social practitioners that are trained in that area where we can refer people to. So yeah, so all of those things make a practice or a workplace age friendly. Next slide, please. Environment. I mean, environment is obviously vital, but there are subtleness that sometimes people aren't quite aware of. So somebody with dementia may see a shiny floor, which I might think is nice and clean, and people might see that that is really good, as water, and I might not like to walk across that. Actually, a toilet sign, I should actually have the signage as a toilet and not written as a toilet, and that would probably be better for somebody that's got slight sight problems as well. Notice boards should be clear. The environment should probably have a section for people, an older person section with information for them, for example. Stairs should be marked. We should have disabled areas close to the area so that people can park with ease. Chairs are really important with arms, for example. And all these things I didn't really realise until we started looking at our environment. All these things make your environment age friendly. Next slide, please. Access to primary care. Yes, so, you know, it's not just about appointments. It's also about, you know, making sure that people are aware of bus routes, and that we offer our appointments appropriately, and that we advocate for people, particularly on the Isle of Wight, for example. More and more people are now offered appointments off the island, and it's really important that we advocate for people that make sure that their appointment is at 9 o'clock in Southampton, and that if I hear that they've got an appointment, an older person who lives in Ryde and has to get to Southampton by 9 o'clock, it's near on impossible. You know, I couldn't get there for 9 o'clock. I'd probably have to go the day before. So can you imagine a very, you know, an 80-year-old trying to get somewhere like that, you know? And if I, as a GP, hears that, I must support them in that. You know, I can get somebody else to support as well. You know, I don't have to do that, but I must support them in changing that. So it's thinking that wider picture as well for an older person, but all those other things. Access is not just about access in that sense, but of course Emma's already mentioned about accessibility. I would just like to say, for people listening, we did have accessibility ramps before we did this work, but parking in disabled spaces, we've offered lots of things, lots of nail cutting services and things like that, so that to support people to access age-friendly services at my surgery. Is there another slide? I'm not sure there is. Age-friendly care plans. I always forget the care plans. Care plans are really important, and it's really important that the older person. Sorry, that's my son trying to ring me, and I've tried to put my phone on silent. For some reason it doesn't work. Person-centered care plans are really, really important, and you can work again with the social prescribers and care navigators to make sure that the person understands that actually they understand what they want as they get older, and also that the care planning is not just about end-of-life care planning, but it's also about other things that they might be interested in doing, and that they've talked about their interests as well. I think sometimes we sometimes don't give older people those ideas to pursue. Can I have the next slide, please? There we go. And that's the slide I hand back to Emma. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so obviously once we'd done this framework document, we needed to make sure this got disseminated to GP surgeries across the island, which we did through many sort of presentations. And we also felt it was appropriate to pull together the learning from this experience into a toolkit and a short film. So you can see here the cover of the toolkit, and the toolkit was very much about how we did the plan, do, review, the plan, the actions, and the reviewing. So taking your PPG and what's the project plan, what are we going to do, then who are we going to engage with, that whole doing stage, and then the reviewing, well, what have we achieved and what still do we need to do, what further action. So this was all captured in the toolkit, and we received funding actually for this toolkit and short film through NHS England, and for a while this was on their website alongside the short film. And we're going to show you the short film now, which really does capture everything that we put into this piece of work.
I'm Joyce, and I've been a patient at Tower House from when I moved back from the mainland, which was approximately 10 years ago. And about 2 or 3 years ago, I saw the notice for the patients' participation group, which I joined.
My name's Michelle Legg. I'm a GP at Tower House Surgery in Ryde, the Isle of Wight. We applied for funding and were successful in order to implement age-friendly projects across the island. One of those projects, in order to get WHO accreditation, is to make primary care age-friendly. We asked our patient participation group for their help in this, because actually we needed their input to see what would make access, for example, to primary care, to my surgery, age-friendly. And it's no use deciding that yourself without actually asking older people for their opinions. Co-producing the age-friendly surgery framework with our patient participation group has made it relevant for our local community.
We, as a group, have put forward suggestions, and they have been looked at really favourably and are put into operation where they can be.
For example, GPs going and greeting their patients, collecting them and bringing them to the room. Rightio, how are you?
Yes. Some of the things that have come through from our discussions is that the steps have been improved. The stripes make it easier for people who have difficulty seeing so much, so that is a good thing. The surgery has put in chairs that people that have difficulty pushing themselves up without arms makes it better.
Our receptionists actually engage in conversation. I know that they're quite proud of the seniors board, and they voluntarily update it and promote that to the patients. It's also about thinking about access when patients are requiring lifts from their carers and their care availability may be limited. It's also about knowing that the buses may not always be running at an appropriate time, and being mindful that we could potentially offer appointments around that.
As we get older, we all find that we need things that we never ever thought we would need, and unless that is known, the improvements in people's lives can't happen.
So, for example, because my staff have had dementia awareness, if patients tend to be forgetful of their appointments, they might send a memo to the registered GP that patient is with to advise them that they've noticed this, and we could ask about that when we next see the patient.
There are lots of small things that are happening and have happened, but I personally feel that the best thing that has come from the group, from what we are doing, is that the patients are finding a voice.
Thank you. Do you know, every time, apart from seeing yourself on TV, which is always a bit difficult, every time I see that, I just love seeing Joyce, and she's just lovely. And for people who won't know, we've completely redone our waiting room, and probably one of the nicest things to have come out of this. I've always run around, always being very proactive about dementia and age friendly, and my colleagues always just they let me get on with it. And but my colleague, who's always sort of sat back, let me do it, she's in sort of in charge of internal decoration of the surgery. She went and did it all as an age friendly, dementia friendly, without me even asking, and she made sure it was all according to dementia friendly and age friendly, and I was really touched by that. And so our waiting room doesn't actually look like that anymore, but it's all according to dementia friendly and age friendly. You know, it's followed certain, made sure it is accordingly, and I was really pleased with that. So yes, it is a very nice video, and I very much liked Joyce's words at the end. I thought that was really nice, and that's the most important thing, isn't it, that the patients found a voice.
Thank you, Michelle. We've obviously done a number of projects where we have worked with older people. We've to co-produce, and it's really important. It's been amazing to actually see how some of the services have changed, and how older people are much more happy, content with the services as a result. So obviously the surgery here is one great example.